Hey guys, Thomas the Solo Jr. here, aka Mustached Tom, here to review the movie Saw 10, or Saw X. If you end up enjoying this full movie review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers. Second and third to my Patreon and PayPal, where you to help support me and my channel directly. And fourth to my Discord server you can join, collab, and chill and do all that cool stuff. And showing will be reminded at the end of the review. With all that out of the way, let's get into Saw X. So I have seen the trailers for this quite a bit of times, and I was not aware that this, well, actually, I learned at some point, I didn't know the initial watch, but at some juncture I learned that this was a sort of prequel-esque type of Saw movie along the way. Meaning that John Kramer would still be alive within the Saw franchise, and in fact, in the plot that we would be following a lot of him throughout the opening act. That is very much the case here in Saw X. So, with that out of the way, this will be a spoiler review, just in case anybody is entrenched in the Saw franchise, because this franchise is known for its twists and turns and, you know, who's the one responsible, or like, does he have another new minion, or, you know, any of those questions. This seems to set up that that he does have his apprentices, but that is not the ultimate turnabout. And in fact, I would say that this one is very minuscule, if not only sort of hinted at, but it is, I would probably say, on the lower end of the, like, what the fuck just happened. It's more like, oh yeah, that sort of seems to be in line with everything that we've been told. Anyway, I'm getting a little sidetracked at the end there. So, as I mentioned, and as we go through the plot and story, we begin actually following John and his doctorly visit, seeing him getting his brain scan and talking to a near dear friend or just a friend that just happened to be also getting an operation. And he, his quote-unquote friend, I believe his name is like Henry or something or other, makes the claim that he was cured due to some sort of medical treatment that is not applicable in America, due to, and I do believe, in my humble opinion, that this is a great jab at America's hospital system, because it's garbage. And you know what? I golf clap the Saw movie, because I think we need a lot more movies saying how the hospital treatment, or, you know, healthcare in general is shit, and I like that the Saw franchise is poking holes at that. I think that is very much warranted still. So I like when our horror movies can do some meta commentary while doing what it does best. So once again, golf clap to that. Anyway, as we progress, he goes to get said treatment, and he is slowly introduced to the doctors that will be helping participate in that activity. But there's some tight security, as this is again off the books, and even he has to be kept out of the loop up until he makes his way to their facility. He's given quote-unquote said treatment, and after given some time and looking it over and doing a little bit of deep digging after the fact, and noticing and checking the facility when it's like cleared out, he learns that they more so just drained some blood and moved the tumor around instead of, like, I guess, like, removing it. I think that's what the implication was supposed to be here. So with that being set off, Jigsaw is obviously upset, so he devises to trap the doctor's quote-unquote scam artist, as he puts them as, and puts them under the traps with the assistance of Amanda, grabbing all of them in the first place via the vintage slash iconic pig mask sort of vibe going on, and attacking each one, putting them in a unconscious state, and then moving their bodies to said facility where the game, the game, as Jigsaw likes to put it, can commence. So they are all shackled up, and one is put in their trap first. And this is early on in Jigsaw's career, so he doesn't mind being directly in the vicinity along with Amanda, so the people there know what they look like. Not that that will help them in any way, because, they have to survive the actual games to do anything about it. So anyway, the traps commence, and one by one, surprise, surprise, death follows death. And each one seems to be a little bit tailor-suited, as it were, to their practices, or rather, what they need to learn or sacrifice in order to get out. Now, this is, of course, akin to a more vintage Saw-like era, where the traps are indeed escapable, and it is up to the people to get themselves out once they're, in that bind in the first place. We see that the first two victims, if we can call them that, are cemented so close to finishing, but they just don't quite hit the mark. They spend a little bit too much time freaking out, and that is a reasonable, thing to sort of, balance between, freaking out versus actually being able to, say, tear your leg off or do any of the other gruesome activities in order to survive. That is the, again, going back to the more vintage route of Saw, is that you sacrifice a great deal of pain to overcome these obstacles, and those are often related to the thing that, to a body part that may have facilitated it, or, through the eyes, if you were like a observer or something. Anyway, so out of all the traps set, what makes this interesting is that we actually see, I want to say a bit mid through the movie, one of the individuals set for one of the traps is named Gabriella. She seemed one of the more innocent among the scammers, as it were, and she actually manages to get out of her trap, which is a very rare, and Amanda would know that too herself, being that she herself survived traps. I think this takes place after Saw 2 or 1. I think it would have to be 2, right, though? Because didn't she become his apprentice after 2? I don't remember. It's been way too long, and I didn't revisit the entire Saw franchise in preparation for this, so I don't remember where chronologically this exactly would fit, but point being is that she still is very new to this in terms of this particular movie. Let's just say that much. With that being established, however, the main doctor, who has been a thorn, as it were, the biggest thorn in the side, eventually finagles her way to getting access to a gun, which a disgruntled individual who is one of the patients, makes his way into the said facility about a bit earlier, and we actually learn that these two are a bit of a together item, as it were, significantly at this portion of the film, and so much more so that they seem to be willing to turn the tables, as it were, against Jigsaw, which is, I think, the first time this has happened in the Saw franchise. So, digging into some more new territory here, and this is one of the very first times this is directly challenging Jigsaw's morals against himself, where the doctor not only kills Gabriella after she had successfully escaped, which pulls her even lower than the low, but furthermore persist on getting an innocent child involved in one of the next traps alongside Jigsaw himself. This next trap is a blood teeter-totter, blood boarding, as she refers to it as, between John and this innocent kid. John persists to try to get as much on him as possible, but the kid actually does take a turn in that torture part segment, as it were. But John still takes the brunt of the blood, seeping, just drip, just fountaining, rather, I should rather say as a word, into the mouth, as, again, waterboarding in itself is a quite devious, torturous method, as I've come to understand. So blood probably isn't that much better, if anything. Probably just as worse, or even worse, probably. But despite that, she and him, the couple, are so entrenched on wanting their money, they head upstairs and begin to search for it, because John told them that that's where the money was earlier in the movie. But, lo and behold, when she finds a bag-shaped item, when she uncovers it, it reveals to be a timer, and it unlocks the door via a trap. And I guess this is how this works. I don't understand it fully, but it somehow undoes the trap that Jigsaw and the kid are currently in. That's the only one I'm a little bit confused by in terms of how that all relates to each other. I guess one trap can only be activated at a time or something. I don't know. Yeah, that one's very bizarre, but I digress. Point being is that the two of them are in a room with a one pocket hole of air, as it begins to fill with a gas of sorts that, like, tears apart if you breathe it in. So the two have to fight for the opening, and he had claimed earlier in the movie, that she would fight and kill him. So he had predicted this outcome, Jigsaw did, and sure enough, it came true. As he set up that the gun wouldn't go off, the gun that he brought in with him, that being the guy that entered the room. So, apparently there was a mid-credit sequence. I didn't stick around for it personally. I didn't know that Saw movies generally did that, but I guess more and more movies feel inclined to do it whenever they want to sequel bait even further past 10, I guess. But that's neither here nor there. And I'll just wait and see for whenever Saw decides to return again or whatever. Anyway, in terms of this movie overall, I think that this is a pretty decent, if not one of the better Saw movies within the franchise. I think having the slower build-up and revelations of all having that unfold actually allows for quite a decent pace as to allow people to settle in and figure out sort of what's going on in terms of who John is claiming as his victims in his next game. as well as set up who are actually going to be in the traps, aka the scam artist. The slower build-up definitely is something that I think that has often been missed in the Saw franchises, and at least in more of the more recent ones, they seem to like open up with a trap. There is an interesting like earlier segment in the movie where John witnesses some thief guy like attempting to steal, and he like enters the frame of the room so the thief can see him, and he puts it back, but we see beforehand like a trap version of him get like, so I guess this is all in Jigsaw's head, is supposed to be the representation of this. I think that's what's going on anyway. This is sort of to like hint at what's to come, which I think is actually a more interesting way of doing the earlier on trap, is sort of having Jigsaw internalize how he's going to trap somebody in that way. But again, having the man stop his activities, he had made his good choice, rather, and thus is not among the ones that are trapped. So, along the traps themselves, again, outside of the two different traps, like one deactivating the other, I don't understand how that works, but generally speaking, I think that the rest of the traps are pretty much straightforward, which is very intuitive, very basic. Not a lot of time. That's something that a lot of the Saw movies did prior. Usually it would be like this long setup. And I don't remember what Saw movie it was. I want to say it was 4, 5, or 6. It's one of the latter ones where it was like a group effort. Like the timer was like a massive one, and like there were like mini timers within each like capsulated room, and they had to like work together, but they kept like thinking like it was, every person from themselves, so they kept like fighting for their opportunities to escape. And lo and behold, when the two people were at the end, they did not have the sufficient amount of blood required to get out, thus leading to that outcome at the end of that particular Saw movie. That was definitely, I think, from what I can remember, one of my favorite Saw of the franchise movies, outside of the first one. I can barely remember the other ones as far as I can, as far as my memory can allow me to remember these movies, but I digress. Point being is that I think that this is among one of the stronger ones due to its more subtle pacing at the beginning at the very most, and showing us why these characters are being placed in the traps, I think, is a very vital part to Saw, which makes his whole motto worth its weight in salt, if that's the expression I want to put forth. And testing that moral within the context of the movie later on is definitely an interesting twist to that. I think that allows for some humanity to be put back into John, and since this is earlier on in John's career, we can definitely say that this definitely makes it seem like a little bit more of a who's the true bad guy? Is it the scam artist, or is it the guy who's simply doing these tests and these people are getting, they can't get themselves out of these situations once they are placed in them? So definitely reinvigorating that old vintage question of, when you have the bad people in the traps. It's utilizing one of the things I often hate about horror movies or other horror movies, and that's the dislikable characters, and utilizing it to its advantage by having the protagonist, that being Jigsaw in this case, actually, interestingly enough, challenge and call out that these people are bad and say, yeah, you're pieces of shit and you deserve to be in these traps. and actually showing us why they deserve to be in these traps, and being like, you know, that moral, darker shade of gray coloring of a character is Jigsaw, if anything. He is like teetering, closer to that darkness, as it, or evil, pure evil, as it were. Which I do think like that the latter Saw movies, when like the unwinnable traps is like definitely, which I don't think were his doing anyway. If I remember the details of all the Saw movies, they were like one of his apprentices, one of his three. I forget the difference between the two guys, but it's one of the two guys that does it that way. It's like, well, that guy's just totally evil. It's like, fuck that guy, you know. But it definitely refocuses back on the initial thing, which I think needs to be, again, at the core of sort of Saw's, longevity within its franchise, is having that sort of quandary put forth at the forefront of the movie. With that being said, in terms of a score, because it utilizes what's typically as a disadvantage as an advantage, I actually want to give this movie a higher score than I would typically would. I'm actually going to give this movie an 8 out of 10. I think that this movie utilizes something that I would again typically see as a disadvantage, and recontextualizes it into an advantage via the writing of how it's directly confronted that these are bad people, with in top of the general pacing of the movie, which allows people to digest that level of information and not just be flung first into like the myriad of trap that usually starts us off in the later half of some of the earlier, not Saw 1 movie, but some of the later ones anyway. So yeah, definitely one of the higher ranked Saw movies, I would definitely say. If you haven't seen it, and if you're already a Saw fan, I would actually highly recommend it. If you're not, and if you're not a fan of grotesque blood, dismemberment, or any of that stuff, then I'd probably say I'm not sure how you even entered into this franchise, and I'm not sure this is a good one to enter either, if that is something you're highly against anyway. So, know your limits, I guess, is the best way I can put that. Anyway, that is my full review of Saw X. If you ended up enjoying this full review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. The first will head you over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers. Second, there to my Patreon and PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel directly. And fourth, my Discord server you can join, collab, and chill, and do all that cool stuff for free. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye!